I don't know about anybody else, but I have been rather anxious this week. Been anxious for quite a few weeks. We had our elders meeting a couple weeks ago, and I'm a little slow sometimes. And I was like, we're talking about, hey, can you pray for each other? And I was like, yeah, I've been really anxious. It's just my PTSD and everything else. I mean, almost like to the verge of paranoia. And then at the end, John, I said something about, and I'm preaching, and whatever. And I said, on anxiety. That's probably why. John goes, I figured that out. Like when we started, I was like, well, I didn't. Okay. So just know that I am never preaching at anyone. This is always, I write the sermon for myself and then I just share it with everybody. I'm going to go back through. I'm not going to read it all right now, but we will, of course, reference it. But I've been told multiple times in the last few weeks how this church, that this is a church of vulnerable people, and that we are okay saying that we are not okay. I don't know how many other people have been in many different churches. But growing up, I traveled to a bunch with my dad and my uncles, singing in churches and visiting churches, and then, of course, bouncing around in the Air Force. I went to a lot of churches, and I've been to big churches, and I've been to churches that would make this, look like a mega church. I've been to a lot of churches, but I've never been anywhere that the congregation, everybody, the staff, the head pastors, the associates, the congregation was okay to say, I'm not okay. And I think that is something that is very powerful in our weakness. I mean, we've gone over that in the first part of this message about talking about how knowing that we need to just give up, just let go and let God, as they say, right? So we give it over to him and we just let him take care of it. But I still think, I would venture to say, if I was so bold, to say that we still, on a regular basis, fight anxiety. And then sometimes things happen that we see no foreseeable good outcome. You look at it and you go, I have no clue whatsoever how I can get out of this and still be okay. We'll go into more. I mean, we have a couple veterans in here. We've been, I was deployed to Afghanistan, and while you're there, you're just like, I'm not going to make it home. Like, that's just, when you come to the fact that you're like, I'm okay dying here, might not be a good thing. I'm not saying that's where we need to be, but everybody gets to that point, it seems like in at least Afghanistan, that you just go, I'm not going to make it home. And that's an anxiety that hits on a whole different level. So on that, I want to use a quote. Now, just like many times, please understand, I'm not lifting up a man or condoning any behavior of theirs. I'm not saying that everything they say is great and is the word of God. I'm not tying myself to them or their ministry. But if God can make a donkey talk, then I think that he can use anyone to say anything. With that said, there's a man by the name of John Gray from South Carolina. If you know who he is, you know why I put that disclaimer in there. And it's kind of ironic with the quote, but here's the quote. Church is not a place where the broken, I did not put this on the slide. So church is not a place where the broken should have to hide the truth of their condition. I should be able to come in here and say, I'm not okay. Today I'm in pain. I drank myself to sleep. I smoked myself to sleep. I slept with someone to ease the pain. It wasn't the sex that I wanted. I wanted to feel safe. But I tell you people that, but I tell you, or people will tell you, oh, you whore, this, that. We say we want the truth, but it's not the truth. We want surface expressions to get out of here on time so we can go watch our football game, to check Jesus off the box. Yeah, I went to see him. No, you didn't. You did not go to see him. You went to see a fake vision of Jesus that tells you how you want to live, when the word tells you how you should live, but you don't want that word. You want a preacher that tells you that how you're living is okay, and I'm not that dude. You know why I'm not that dude? Because I tried to live any kind of way. You can't live how you want and call yourself a Christian. You can't do what you want and call yourself a believer. You can't say what you want and treat people like you want and call yourself a believer. You can't do it. I heard that on social media. I saw it on a little video, and I was like, wow. And then it was like I think it was like the next Sunday or something, somebody stopped me and said, hey, the first time that I was here, you were preaching and you were talking about how you suffered with, alcohol and some other things in your life. And I was like, wow, this is where we need to be. This is a vulnerable church. Then it was a couple weeks ago, somebody else, I'm standing back there by the sound booth, and they caught me and kind of said something similar. And I was like, and then I thought about it. And I'm like, wow, we really are a place where Jesus said that the church should look like a hospital. And that's not just for sick people. Why Randy had to leave, because his family, please keep them in your prayers. They just can't seem to fight this sickness. Can't seem to break it. So I pray that we maintain that type of discipleship to one another here. We don't judge anyone for what they're going through, but we lift up Jesus in everything and continually point others to him. Now our 3 points. Well, Noah's still here. I thought Caden was taking over. So that's in your bulletin. There are a couple of, or 3 points here. The root cause of anxiety, our heavenly blank. They're pretty easy. Y'all should be able to figure these out. We'll provide what we need, and you are more blank than the birds. If you notice there's something new there in your bulletins, there is a word search. I wanted to make people a little anxious to get us into the theme here, right? So there's 5 words. There's only 4 blanks, but 5 words, and they're fear, anxiety, father, worry, and valuable. So those are your words for your word search. Fear, anxiety, father, worry, and valuable. I'm sure that you've heard that don't worry or don't be afraid is mentioned 365 times. Now, of course, that in the Bible, that depends on what translation. There's different variations, but I like it anyways. I want to start in verse 33. But seek first his kingdom, the kingdom of God, and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Seek first. What does that mean? What does it mean to seek first? You'll hear some people, they will say, before I do anything, whether it is what shirt I'm going to wear. It mentions that. What pants, what shoes, what am I going to eat? Now, there are some things that I think that God says, it's okay, just put on a t-shirt. Like, don't wear something to offend your brother. We do have to follow those things. But should I have the blueberry oatmeal or the strawberry oatmeal? Should I have a piece of wheat toast or white toast? Right? Pray about it. But if he doesn't say, oh, you should have the wheat toast, don't think that he's forsaken you. Okay? Don't get anxious because he said have sourdough instead of, right? So what happens when we seek him first? I know that in my life I'm going to end up hitting this. I'm going to move this back. Or I'm going to take it and end up down there. I don't know. I move around a lot. I hope that y'all can keep up, or the camera can keep up. I try to stay in the camera. I know that in my life, there's been many situations that I have not seeked him first. I've made rash decisions and things have happened. We were talking about Wednesday night. We were on prayer and we got into other things. I'd have small little plug for Wednesdays. If you're not coming, we have very powerful Wednesday nights. Just talking over, I mean, right now we just bring questions and talk about what we were talking about on Sunday morning, but it's more, interactual. We're face to face and we can, well, I think this, well, let's talk about this. And they're great. They're great. So come on Wednesday nights to Pursuit if you are able. So I've made rash decisions, but Wednesday night we got on Abraham's promise. And God said, I'm going to make you the father of all nations and I'm going to give you a kid. And he's like, I'm too old. And then he started worrying and he got anxious, I think. And he said, you know what? God said he's going to give me a kid. He gave me this person. So I'm going to fulfill that promise through this, right? Anybody ever done that? Yeah. Everybody probably has at some point said, God told me this promise. I see a way to fulfill it. So I'm going to fulfill it through this thing. And then what happens? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. I mean, let's just be honest. If you've never been in, never heard me preach, I don't mind if you shout back at me. When I ask questions, I don't expect it to be silent sometimes. So don't be afraid. I am loud. You can amen. You can shout me down. I'll get louder. For two reasons. I have a microphone. You don't. We haven't got to that point yet. We'll start passing one around sometime. There's a song called First Things First by Consumed by Fire. Anybody ever heard it? Great song. I love it. I'm going to read it to you, and it's up here. All the things that I have held dear, the vanities that whispered in my ear, what would I do if they all disappeared? Riches and fame and all that they could buy, I've come to find they never satisfy. What would I gain if my soul's the price? I don't want to love what the world loves. I don't want to chase what the world does. I only want you. I only want you. First things first, I seek your will, not my own. Surrender all my wants to you. Keep the first things first, to live your truth, to walk your ways. Set my eyes, Lord, I fix my face on you. All my desires reversed, to keep the first thing first. I give it all, my life and offering. My heart is yours, so have your way in me. Your kingdom's all I want to seek. If you break that down and just think about it and say, I need to apply this to my life. This is what we have been called to do. I mean, to seek his kingdom first. What does that mean to you? Now, that is different to everybody in that how you will act out on that. Maybe you seeking his kingdom is to go stand on a wooden apple box downtown on Douglas and Water or something and to preach. Anybody? No volunteers? Okay. Maybe for you that is to come to church and to be on one of the ministry teams that we have, whether it be music or greeting or coffee even. The coffee doesn't make itself. We have people that come in early to bless you with coffee and cookies. They might be magical. I don't know. I can't eat wheat right now, so you'll just have to tell me. But that's different for everybody, how you work in the kingdom, because it says, the Bible says, if we were all the eye or if we were all the, right? We can't all be the same member of the body. I have gifts that John doesn't have, and John has gifts that I don't have. I cannot play the piano. And Noah, he just picks it up and plays it. I mean, it's kind of remarkable how some people have certain gifts, right? I mean, we have gifts of We won't get into all that. That's not today's sermon. Everybody has different gifts. So what should we do after we seek his kingdom? And what should we do after we get his decision in the matter? Has anybody ever fervently seeked God's decision on something? And Lord, what do you want me to do in this? And he says, I want you to move to this place, and I want you to start a small church, and there's nobody's going to come for a while, and you're just going to be by yourself, but you're not going to have a job. Anybody? It happens. My great-grandfather built churches all up and down. He wanted to be, everybody wants to be a missionary to Africa, right? Like that's where we want to go. My great-grandfather, Southern Baptist missionary, is in a place called Sequatchie Valley. Not anymore. He was 96 when he passed, but that was 1990 something. So great guy. So he wanted to do that. He prayed about it. And God said, I put you in your Africa. There's people in the Appalachians that can't read. There's people in the Appalachians that have never seen people outside of the Appalachians. I don't know how many of you have gone to some of these backwoods towns in the Appalachia, but there's places just outside of my hometown that if you don't know somebody in there, you don't drive into that part of the mountain. They got to know you. They got to know your vehicle. If you get a new vehicle, you call ahead. You let them know you're coming. So there are people that are just as backwards in the Appalachians and don't know God as there are in any other country. And I'm going to tell you today that there's just as many people in Wichita, Kansas, and the surrounding area that don't know God as there are anywhere else. We have been called to bring the gospel to all corners of the world, but we first need to clean our own house. We first need to bring it to all the corners of our own house, and you can literally start in your living room. We all know people. Maybe you not suffer. Maybe you know people, friends, family, whatever. Randy talks about some of his family that he's just always sharing the gospel with them. I was taking a evangelism course, and they said that on average, a non-believer has to hear the gospel 82 times before they accept it. So don't give up because you don't know if you're number 81 or 83. On average. You might be number 183. I don't know. Maybe they're stubborn. Verse 31 and 32. So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans, or Gentiles, run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. So how many of us have had the blessing to wait on God for a necessity? Yeah, you like that? Everybody thought I was going somewhere else. But when something you go, God, I don't see how I'm going to get to the next paycheck. I don't have food for my kids. I don't have money to pay my bills. And God says, wait on me. And you go, I need food. And he says, wait on me. That's a blessing. That hurts, Matt. It hurts to say that when I'm in need, that God is blessing me. But it's true. We need to be more vulnerable, not just to each other, but more vulnerable with God. We need to not just lay it out to him and want this fast food society, this microwave religion that when I put it in, I get it back in 2 minutes. Thank you. We want this though. We want to be able to go, God, I really need a car. Mine's breaking down. Open the door. There it is. Woohoo! Right? That's what we want. But that's not what happens. God tells us to wait. And that hurts because we, as a Western society, aren't good at just waiting. I thought about when I started this sermon today that I was just going to stand up here for like 5 minutes and just stare at everybody. And then I thought about it, and Ted put me on a timer, and I probably won't have 5 extra minutes. I got So my first point, and this is not scientific. This is not a scientific reason, mind you. But my first point, click it. Not that one. You went too far. The root cause of anxiety is fear. There we go. Now you can click it. Fear or worry or unbelief, right? How many times do we say, I didn't put it up there, and it's not in, unbelief's not in your word search, but people grumbling about my word search? Y'all are a quick bunch, by the way. I've heard everybody complaining about it all day, but I did that on purpose. So fear, unbelief. Last time that I preached on justifying our unbelief. How many of us do that? We say, I need this, but I don't know if God's going to give it to me. Or I need this, or I need this to happen. And then we go, well, I did do this sin, so God's not going to give me that because, right? We all justify our unbelief in one way or another, but what that does is when we don't believe that God's going to provide what we need or in ways that we want, we start unbelieving, which then just starts piling on worry and fear. I've always heard that worrying's like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but you don't get anywhere, right? So why do we do it? Why do we not trust that God will do it? In 2015, I was telling some people Wednesday night, in 2015, so I enlisted in the Air Force 18 days after high school graduation. I did the delayed enlistment program a year prior because I wanted to graduate in my Air Force blues. They do not allow you to do that in the Air Force. You got to graduate college or high school, college. Not yet. You got to graduate high school before you can enlist. I mean, there's waivers, but I was going to graduate. So from 2002, it was 13 years later, 2005, I got caught up in something called the Enlisted Review Boards. I was doing a special duty assignment, and I was the only one of my career field in that special duty assignment. So when they said we need to cut X amount of percent of this job, they go, oh, there's one person with a different career field, so we'll just cut him. But it was special duty. That was in England that I did that. I come here in 2014, and then in 2015, they said, oh, by the way, you're getting kicked out. I was like, what just happened? Like, there's nothing in Wichita, Kansas. Why am I here? Why would God bring me here to then kick me out of the only job that I know right now? Like, so a lot of fear and anxiety there. And I was doing this whole class, and I was in to transition. And I was in the class with my chief, E9, the chief master sergeant of my squadron. And I was on a first name basis with him all week. Brian. And it had come up the first week. It had come up that they were re-reviewing the enlisted review boards. And my commander had come in, and he said, hey, if you want to stay in or if you want to get out, if your name comes up, you can stay in or get out. And I prayed, and I said, God, if you want me to stay in the Air Force, take my name off the enlisted review boards. Seemed an impossible feat because I have no control over that. So it's impossible, right? Because we can't change it. Second week comes by, commander comes in, and he's walking. He's like, Matt, I need to find you. Brian is like Sergeant Webster. I'm like, what happened? So generally, when your major comes in to find you where somewhere he's not supposed to be, something bad is happening. So I'm like, mom died, dad died, wife died, kids died, big fiery car crash. I don't know, something, house fell in on them. I went full Job, right? So I thought something bad had happened. And he's like, well, there's somebody in that office and there's somebody. And I was like, just stop. We will sit on the ground if we have to. What's going on? And he's like, I don't know how to really tell you, but while they were doing the review, they found out that your name shouldn't have been on there and they took your name off the enlisted review board. So I start laughing. He's like, why are you laughing? I said, I'll stay in. He's like, you're almost done with you sure? I said, no. And I told him he was a Christian man. He understood. He was a good guy. He's not my commander anymore, so that's why. And then 2 years later, I'm not saying was because he's passed. He was a great guy. In 2016, I tested for Tech Sergeant E6. That presidential administration had changed the high-year tenure down to 15 years. So if I didn't make it in 2016, I had to get out in 2017. I got out, obviously. So I didn't make E6. They then changed it a year after, back to 20 years. So I fell in this little pocket that I had to get out. I had no choice. So in 2017, 2 years later, I now get to do the whole thing over again. And I was just, if you want me to stay in, you got to give me a step promotion. I can't. They're not even allowing me to test. Well, I got out and I had some decent jobs here and there. And then I got a job. I'm a machinist. I make airplane parts. I got a job at a place here in town, and mom and dad were getting ready to move. It was 2020. And I said, hey, I got to help my parents move. Will there be any repercussions? They said, no, when you get back, quarantine for 2 weeks. I said, so nothing will happen. If I come back, I have to go out of state and come back, nothing will happen. And they said, no, you'll be fine. That was 5 years ago, almost to the day, by the way. I left on a Friday. We got to Tennessee early Saturday morning. I came back on Sunday, which was March 29th of 2020. I remember because that's my birthday. March 29th, 2020, I get a phone call on March 30th, Monday morning, laying me off. Over the phone, I got broke up by text. I got called and laid off from a job that, I was to the point, so we worked a Wednesday to Saturday, Sunday to Wednesday shift, 12-hour days. They said, hey, we got to cut time back. My boss came to me and said, you're the lead of the area. How do we cut time? I said, first off, you fire people. He said, who do you fire? I said, I'd fire this guy and this guy. They were not working there the next week. He said, all right, we still got to make up for 15%. How would you do that? I said, I'd change the shift schedule. We'd do overlapping, but nobody's working 12-hour days. It cuts off on overtime, saves money on the back end. He said, all right, come up with it. Erica and I came up with it. He implemented it the next week. I was on a path to the top of this company, and they called and laid me off. Now, I look back at it and I was like, I was probably making more than many of the people there. They took my advice. They needed to save money, right? They literally just did what I told them to do. So let me get back. Let me go back because I love this part. I was very mad at God. Many years later, in 2009, so 11 years later, I got married. Erica and I dated for 6 months. We got married at the courthouse. 3 weeks later, I went to Afghanistan. The day before I left, we found out that we were pregnant with Presley, and I'm going to a war zone with my orders said 6+ months, indefinite. Don't know. Might be back in 6, might not be back at all. Couple weeks in, I guess not a couple weeks, couple months in, it was 140 something days in. They come to us, they said, pack your bags, you're leaving. To the point that we didn't even have a plane to leave on, which is funny because we were the Air Force. The plane was broken. We'd go to the terminal, sit there with our bags. They said, the plane's broken. I said, do you realize all of the maintenance squadron is sitting here? Like, let us go fix the plane. We get to go home. Didn't happen. They flew us into, we finally get out. They fly us into a place called Kyrgyzstan. They have tigers, by the way, in Kyrgyzstan. They like to jump the fence. They say, don't run in pairs. And I'm like, what's the pair for? I guess so somebody can tell your story. So we get to Kyrgyzstan, and we had to stay there for 3 weeks. By the time, from the day I left to the time I got back was 154 days that I missed with my newly pregnant wife, right? I mean, I got married and left. 154 days. When I got laid off in 2020, because of that administration at the time, we had that whole extra $600 for people that lost their jobs. I made within $3 of what I was making per week. I made over $1,000 a week on unemployment. But I was mad. I was like, I have to provide for my family. How am I going to do this? The same thing. Like, I'm not losing any money. So what am I mad about? But I'm like, how am I going to do this? And I was just really arguing and wrestling with God. And he said, it's not your job to provide for them. It's mine. I said, okay. And then I was like, well, I'm big on identity. We need to know our identity. I was like, I'm tied up in this. I'm a machinist. I'm this, I'm that. And he said, no, through Erica, no, you're a child of God. And that's where your identity needs to lie. So at the very end of it, I finally get a job and I'm back at work and God says, count the days. I counted the days and it was 154 days from the day, or 155 days from the day I got laid off to the day I went back to work. So not only did I get my 154 days back with my bride, I got an extra day. So what was I worried about? And I never lost a paycheck. $3 a week is all the difference. So do you firmly believe, not just know in your mind, but believe in your heart that God will provide for your every need? Y'all said it out loud. I'm going to hold you to it now. We had a meeting here, and I was talking to a pastor here in town, and he said that when he's planted a couple churches, and he planted a church here in town, and he said, we don't have a building. And he said, God, you got to provide a building. We don't have people that can afford it. They provided a building. God, a building, just, hey, here's this building, here you go, right? Last summer, it got way too hot, and their HVAC unit went out. And somebody gave them a $17,000 HVAC unit. He said that he tells people, I don't want growth in my church right now. And everybody, ooh, right? Like that stands out. He said, I don't have enough spiritual leaders in my church to disciple the people in my church. So if more people come in the door, who's going to disciple them? He said, we as a church need to disciple amongst each other. We need to have a relationship and disciple with each other. So when other people are coming in that don't know God, who's going to disciple that person if you can't disciple her? He said he tells people, I don't know. He said, we don't have enough people to pay tithe. So everything comes from God. He said, it sure ain't my checks. He said, so he'll tell people sometimes, your check might not be good here. There's other churches that need your money. That is not anything I've ever heard from a church. I've never heard a pastor say, I don't want your money and I don't want you to visit my church. He said, because I might have 4 people that can disciple that are spiritual enough to lead the rest of the church. So I might be able to grow 4 more people. If God will do it for him, if God did it for the people in the Bible, then why won't he do it for you? Is he the same today, yesterday, and forever? Or did he stop? Point 2. I told y'all I'm long-winded. I'm already in the red. Point 2, our Heavenly Father will provide what we need. So if you've ever worried what others think about you, we have people in this church, and I've brought it up, and I didn't ask them permission, so I'm not going to name names or look at them. We have people in this church, I've learned, let me go back, the younger generation, some of the younger generation, they care about what people think about them. This whole section, what they wear, how they look, how they talk, how they interact with people, they care about what other people think. We have young people in this church that I don't care if there was one person or 1,000 people in here, their worship doesn't change. They will take communion, they will kneel down, they will pray, they will bawl their eyes out, and it doesn't matter who is looking at them because it's them and God and nobody else. So why do they do it and nobody else? Well, I don't know. And you're afraid if somebody sees you. Are you worshiping them or are you worshiping God? Maybe you got into an argument with somebody, a family member. Oh, I skipped a question. Ever worried about what your earthly parents think about you? Not like, oh, I disappointed them because I stole a car. Just jump right to the top. Or I disappointed them because I stole an Andes Mint from Piccadilly. I was like 5. I didn't know. Okay? Not that, but like, oh, I'm not living up to the expectations that they gave me. Oh, they got rid of me. This church is pretty big, don't know if you noticed, in helping the foster care system and the children in need here in this town. Not just Randy and Sadie, but we have multiple people that work and, come to this church, and they work at boys' homes or girls' homes. They are in the system and seeing these children every single day, right? Those children, whether they can admit it or not, whether they realize it or not, but they think, why did my parents give me up? And then maybe those of us that you have both parents, there are times in your life that you go, I did this, look how good I did. And maybe something was going on in your parents' life at the time. I mean, as a parent, you don't disclose everything with your children, right? But you're just like, oh yeah, that's cool, man. And you just kind of, well, it was something big for him. So do we ever worry about what our parents think about us? Maybe you got into an argument with them or they disowned you for one reason or another. Do you know your heavenly Father this morning? Because my Bible says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. You believe that he will never leave you or forsake you or disown you this morning? Do you honestly think, not just know it here, but believe it wholeheartedly? There's a preacher I used to hear about that every time he got up to preach, he would walk up to the edge of the stage and just take a step. He said, I believe that I'm going to walk on air. He had and take a step. He fell every time. But every time, he said, I believe I'm going to do it. And he would take a step. Do you have that walk out step out on the boat faith? Matthew 10, 29 through 31. Don't know if it's on the slides. Did I put it on? Nope. Is it on the slides? Nope. I probably should have done that because it's not in my notes either. 29 through 31. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, and not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? But even the hairs on your head are all numbered, some of us less than others. Fear not, therefore you are more value than many sparrows. I don't know if any of you have ever like paid attention to a sparrow, but they are very small birds. They don't do much. Oh, next slide. Next slide. Go to the flowers. Even Solomon in all of his glory was never arrayed like one of these. Go to the next one. What purpose does that serve? What actual purpose do all those wildflowers serve? I did not doctor any of these pictures. I literally just took them off the internet. Next. Those are flowers. It's in Holland. They're tulips. Didn't know you could get that kind of blue, but that's like my favorite blue. So why do we worry about what we're going to wear? Next. I don't think there's any more flowers. I only had 3. What's the next slide? Probably should have put them in my notes too. No, Noah's dying back there. He's like, I should have just went home with Dad. So if God is going to put flowers like that, I don't know if you noticed, but in like that first one, there was a windmill. We're talking like hundreds of acres of flowers. I had family that went to Holland during tulip season, and it's just, that is the countryside. Like, windmills are big. They're not as big as our windmills like in Oklahoma, but those windmills are not small, and there are so many flowers that windmill, they had to move back. So if God is going to give places flowers like all of those, then why do we worry? What purpose do they serve? We go, oh man, that's pretty, and then they die, and they're cut up or mowed over, and that's it. That's like a Tennessee orange row up there. K-State purple. Come on, man. I'm not a K-State fan. I'm not from Kansas, but that's about K-State purple. All these flowers. Pay attention to the flowers, and you go, what purpose does that serve other than God saying, look how pretty that is, and if I'm going to make that pretty, then why do you worry about what you're going to wear? Why do you worry about what you look like? I mean, be modest. I'm not saying, walk around in skimpy clothing all day, but now I've gone way over time. Let's start bringing it home. Point 3. And here's where I want everybody to really reflect. Do you know your worth this morning? Do you know how valuable you are to God? Do you know how valuable you are to this city? Do you know how valuable you are to this congregation? And I might not have told you, but do you know how valuable you are to me? I like to stand in the back of the church because I get to watch people worship. I get to watch how people pour themselves out to God. And even when I'm up here, one reason I like to preach is I like to watch faces. Sometimes you can see the light bulb click on. They go, oh, I've never looked at it that way. I've never thought about it like that. Or you see the ones where they go, you got me on that one. I see that one a lot. Go to verse 27. It's on there somewhere. I've told you, I did not, I was not prepared. Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? Has anybody been able to worry more time to live? Scientifically, it has been proven the opposite. So have you ever, you hear this a lot, those of us that go to the VA, I don't know about other hospitals, I go to the VA, they ask you a lot, in the past 30 days, have you felt worthless or hopeless? Every time. You can go to a dentist appointment and they're like, do you feel hopeless? No, I feel an abscessed tooth. Can you fix it? So they ask you all the time, and you think about it and you go, there are times that I've felt worthless or hopeless, right? There's been times that I suffer from anxiety and depression. That's why I chose this message when Randy asked. I chose because I have a personal relationship with anxiety. And I have a personal relationship with depression. And one of the ones that I always love is when you say, hey, I'm not feeling it today. I'm pretty depressed. And people will just go, well, just be happy. Just get over it. Okay, thank you. I'll remember that next time I'm drowning. I'll just swim. Right? I can swim, but I'm going to close on this. And then Romans 8:26-28, not in the slides. Don't even worry about it. You can turn there with me if you have your Bibles. If not, just listen. Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. For we do not know what to pray for as we ought, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And he who searches hearts knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. And we know that for those who love God, all things, not some things, not that one thing, but all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. Now, you might be in a place right now that you see no outcome. You see no good way for it to happen. Joseph, was in some of those places. Paul and Silas got thrown in prison and beaten and stripped and beaten and left for dead and beaten and shipwrecked. I haven't been shipwrecked recently, so I wouldn't know. And we look at those things and we go, well, what did they do for it? Well, they only were preaching the truth and they got thrown in prison. But look at the outcome of the things that happened on the backside of it. If it hadn't have been for Joseph being falsely accused and him being in prison for years, he would not have been able to be put into a place of authority to save everybody. If it wasn't for Paul and Silas to be in prison, they wouldn't have been in the place that they were to share the message with the people they shared it with that probably had never heard it. All the prisoners, when the earth shook and the doors opened and the guard comes in, he's like, oh my gosh, everybody's gone. I'm going to just kill myself. And they're like, no, we're still hanging out in here. Yeah, our shackles are undone and the doors open, but nobody left. Why did none of the other prisoners leave? Might not be written, but I guarantee you Paul was sharing the gospel. And then because nobody else left, Paul got taken out of prison, taken to the guard's house, cleaned up, dinner, brought back to talk to the boss in the morning. So although we might not see, we might not think that God can get us out of this, but I guarantee you, I will stand firmly on this. I promise you, God has a plan for whatever you're going through. And it might not be your plan. Almost guarantee that too. You might end up in a place that you never wanted to be in, but you get the opportunity to share the word and the truth and the love of Jesus Christ with people that have never heard it. You get the opportunity and the blessing to be persecuted for Jesus to bring one more into the fold. John, you want to come up? I don't know where John is. You just play it behind me. If there's anybody, I'm just going to open it up for prayer. If you want, by the way, when I say open it up for prayer, I don't mean that the altar or up here or anywhere is closed at any time, ever. You can come up and pray. You're not going to distract me in the middle. But if you're struggling with your worth, your anxiety, worry, fear, anything, and you want prayer, whether it be from me or you just want to kneel down in front and just give it to Christ this morning, the altars are open, always. I'm going to close in prayer and then worship while John plays. Come worship up here. Lay those things that you're worrying about on the altar, but leave them here when you walk away.